What is up, my peeps? Joshua Smith here with another GSD interview. Every single week we interview top entrepreneurs and just straight up top badasses out there dominant in their space. These are people that are choosing to not live a life of mediocrity, but instead to go out there and create epic, amazing, big lives for themselves, their family, and have a big impact on this world. So today, guys, I got a guest I'm really excited to have on the show. This guy I've been following for a while. I'm a big fan of his. He's involved in a lot of different areas, right? He's a keynote speaker, keynote speaking expert. Also is brilliant at tech trends and expert at tech trends, social media, so a guy that I'm really stoked and honored to have on the show. So Patrick Schwerdtfeger, welcome to the show, my friend.
Happy to be here, man. Happy to be with you. Let's dive in.
Yeah, dude. So I'm really stoked to talk to you about what you're doing today, man, because you got a lot of things going on. But before we do that, I'm always interested in our guest journey that led them to entrepreneurship in the first place. So rewind the clocks, man, whether that might be elementary school, junior high school, college, like what led you to becoming an entrepreneur?
I never did well with supervision. That came right from the way I grew up. I kind of struggled with my folks a little bit, and I struggled with my teachers at school. And I'm not a stupid guy. I did okay in school, but I just never liked it. I never liked having a boss. And when I got out of college, I had some good jobs. My bosses, they always gave me a lot of leash. I had a lot of freedom to do what I liked, but I just hated it. I hated it. I always wanted to do something on my own. And it was a long journey. I'm jealous of those people who get out of university, get out of college, they're like 24 years old, and they pick something and they just do that for their whole lives. I think that's such a blessing if that happens, but it didn't happen for me. I did all kinds of stuff, and some of them worked, and some of them I made good money and I hated it. Others I didn't make any money, but I loved it. So it was really kind of a long journey until I stumbled into speaking. And just before we went on air, we were talking about the podcast. I did a podcast back in 2006, and the thing really took off and did pretty well. And that's kind of how I got my start. But then since then, boy, it's gone in a million different directions. And for me, it's really been a question of just thinking bigger and just trying to play a bigger game and trying to come down from the top rather than building up from the bottom. I just think it's a lot easier to come down to your goals from above. And I think you kind of run your life the same way.
Yep, 100%, man. So you try kind of the I don't know, corporate path, if you will, the story that we're all sold. You get out of high school, you go this path, and I know you also said that you wished you had that ability to be able to get that job. And sometimes I don't know. Like, I don't know if people that follow that path, if that's what they really want, or they're just following society's path and they just figure out a way to live with it. But, we find a lot of entrepreneurs that go down that path. They have this internal war, this internal struggle going on, and eventually, man, they just make that move. At what point, because we have a lot of people in that position right now in the corporate world, but they want to become an entrepreneur. At what point did you know it was right for you to just say, screw it, man, I'm going down this other path?
Well, I was working for a .com back in 2000, 2001, 2002, and we had like 12 rounds of layoffs, which was horrible. It was a horrible, horrible culture to be a part of, where just every month or two there was another round of layoffs. And every round that came up, the people who I knew in the company, they're like, dude, you're probably going to be on the list. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? And I was never on the list. They just never wanted to lay me off. I was always still in that core group. And eventually the CEO of that company, who is still a good friend of mine to this day, he pulled me into his office and he's like, look, we're going to have our 13th round of layoffs, and I don't know where to put you after the layoff. Like, what do you want to be doing? Where do you want to be? And I was like, Rod, put me on the damn list. Like, I'm done. I'm out of here. Like, get me on the list, get me out. And so they let me go, and I had a little bit of a severance package. It wasn't anything big, but it was enough to do one of two things. I could have either bought a house and gotten another job, or I could have gone self-employed and used that money as a buffer to try and be self-employed. And so I picked the second route. That was 2002. I was 31 years old at the time. I'm 45 today, so I'm not a young guy anymore. But back then, I went self-employed, and I started doing some lower-level M&A work, which was a feast or famine business. When you make money, you make a bunch of it, but then you starve for 5 months. And then after that, I did some notary work, and then I got into loans and mortgage, which I hated. Those are shark infested waters, man. I did not do well in the mortgage business. And then I did my podcast, which was about real estate, and that took off. And then people started asking me to speak. And right then I was like, you know what? This is way more fun than real estate. And I started speaking full time in 2007, and I've been doing it ever since.
Yeah, love it, man. So when you make that transition, okay, so you have the demand to go out there and speak because you create this amazing podcast, and you have that demand out there, but it can be tough in the speaking world to go out there and monetize on it and make money on it, and there's people that do it right, and there's people that struggle their whole life doing it. What were some of those things that you did initially, or maybe some of the lessons that you learned on how to go out there and become a full-time successful speaker?
Well, it's actually a really interesting question, Josh, because here's the deal. Like, out of all the speakers out there, like 90% of them are what I call platform speakers, which means they're always selling something. They're selling. And some of those guys make a ton of money. I mean, it's a great way to go, but it's not what I wanted to do, right? I wanted to do the 10% that's left does what I refer to as keynote speaking. So those are corporate gigs. Companies pay you a fee. You show up, you speak, and if you tried to sell something, they would never hire you back, right? It is not appropriate. They cut you a check, so you got to deliver a message, and then you get out, take your money, and go back home. So, and I kind of got lucky because back in the day, luck and hard work are correlated, right? You know that. I mean, the harder you work, the more you put yourself in a position to win, the more things go your way. And I had that podcast, which was about real estate. But after a while, people started asking me they said, can you speak about podcasting? Because the podcast had done well. And people were like, hey, how did this, like John Lee Dumas, right? We were talking about that before we started the recording. Like, that guy's a rock star. So people were like, how are you doing what you're doing? And what I did was on a much smaller scale, right? Totally smaller scale, but it was a similar thing, and it was new, and it was the new thing, right? And so everyone wanted to know how I was doing it. So I started speaking about podcasting, which was part of the social media revolution. And they didn't even call it social media back then. It was called social networking, right? They hadn't even coined the phrase, right? And so I started speaking about social networking and social media. And then, keep in mind, I started 2007, I went full time. Right at that time, the Barack Obama campaign started to ramp up. And I don't care about the politics, like Democrat, Republican, I don't care, okay? But his campaign was brand new. No one had ever done that before. Like, he was doing all this stuff on social media. No one had ever done that before. So everyone wanted to talk about it, and I had a good program. So that program, it took me all around the world. Like, literally. I mean, I spoke in Sweden and India and Aruba and Portugal and just anywhere. I went all over the place covering social media because I had a good program. But an interesting thing happened in 2012. You see, when you go to a conference, and you've been to conferences, right? So you got your general sessions, which are your keynotes, and then you've got your breakout sessions, which is like concurrent sessions. They're not as big. Usually the groups split up into 2 or 3 groups. So you make money in the keynotes, right? That's where you make money. And social media was a keynote topic until 2011, 2012, and then it dropped. And it became a breakout topic, and you can't make any money doing breakout, right? All of a sudden, my keynote fees were way down. My revenue was down 40% in 2012. So I had to diversify and figure out something new to cover, and that's when I started covering technology trends in general, of which social media is just one example. Right? And so then big data is another example, and predictive analytics and artificial intelligence and machine learning and virtual reality and autonomous vehicles and all these new topics that I started researching. I just started researching these topics and doing the marketing. Josh, I spend $50,000 a year in advertising, and we can talk about that if you want. Like, I spend money to put my content in front of the right eyeballs. And I think that makes a lot of sense, man. That's what distinguishes the people who are in the sandbox to the people who are on the freeway, right? Most people spend their whole day in the sandbox. But if you want to set your career on fire, you got to spend money to put your name in the right places. And that's what I did. So when I started marketing the technology trends, boy, 2013, it just exploded, and it's been going really, really strong ever since. And it takes me, like I was just in India 2 months ago. I'm going to Paris next month. I go to the Middle East all the time, like Dubai and Bahrain and all these places. Like there is a huge demand for keynote speakers, and you just got to do the marketing right, and then I think it's the best lifestyle available, to be honest with you. It's a great deal.
Yeah, no, I love it, man. And you hit on something so important there, right? Like you may be the greatest speaker, have the greatest product, but it doesn't mean you're going to make money unless you become a brilliant marketer, right? Like, we see this happen all the time. We see, hey, man, I'm the best cook in the world. That may not make you a successful restaurant owner, right? So, and it sounds like a lot of your keynote topics have adapted as you've had to adapt your own marketing to just become successful in those spaces, to bring that as well. So, let's talk about that marketing, man, because I see so many people going wrong here. They're these great practitioners. They just have no idea to get their message out. So. Yeah. With that, okay, you're spending $50,000 a year, a big chunk on Facebook marketing, but you could be wasting that marketing if you don't have the right avatar, right? The ideal clients. I mean, how do you break that down and identify that you're in front of the right eyeballs?
Well, so this is great. So remember, we were talking before, like 90% of speakers are what I call platform speakers, and they're always trying to get business from promoters, right? They're always looking at promoters. I never talk to promoters, right? No promoter ever hires me. The people who hire me are W-2, right? They're employees, they're corporate employees, they're event planners, they're meeting planners, they're conference planners. You can find these people on LinkedIn. You can buy lists. I've bought lists of, for example, I send out postcards, right? That's old school. I send out postcards, 7,000 postcards every 2 months. I send out to 7,000 corporate event planners and meeting planners, and also some bureau contacts that I have, speakers bureaus, because a lot of the business is booked by bureaus. And I have a list of AMC contacts. Those are association management companies, and Helms Briscoe, and a whole bunch of different lists that I've compiled to right around 7,000. And I send that out every 2 months. So to send out 3,000 postcards cost me $3,000. So just doing that alone, right, doing it 6 times a year, that's $18,000 that I spend just in postcards, right? So, and then, yeah, you're right. I do Facebook marketing, and I do LinkedIn marketing, and I do pay-per-click on Google and Bing, and I do remarketing as well. Like remarketing is when, for anyone who doesn't know, like let's say you go to Amazon, you look at a vacuum cleaner or something, and you don't buy it. Then for like the next 7 days, you see that vacuum cleaner every website you go to. Like it's on the side, it's on the top, it's everywhere you go, that vacuum cleaner staring you in the face. Well, you can set that up. I called Google, and they've just walked me through it. And now I've got so if you go to my website, and it doesn't matter if you do or not, like the people who are watching, but if you do go to my site, it's going to put a cookie on your machine, and I'm going to follow you around for 30 days. I'll tell you what, that is some of the best marketing that you could hope for. And I'll tell you how it started. So I published my 4th book earlier this year in January 2016, and I was looking for someone to write a cover quote for the book, and I never actually ended up taking any of them because the people I wanted to write it, they didn't want to write it, and the people who were offering, I didn't want. So, but I went to Brian Tracy's website because I was like, he's pretty motivational. He's obviously a kind of a legend in this space. So I went to his website, I sent him a message. He never even replied to my message, okay? But the bottom line is, after I visited his site, I started seeing Brian Tracy everywhere on all these different sites. And I was like, you son of a bitch. Like that, it never crossed my mind, right, to do this shit, to do remarketing like a vacuum cleaner on Amazon. It never even crossed my mind. So I called Google, and it took an hour and a half. We got it all set up, and it makes you look like a rock star, right? People, they see you everywhere, and they're like, my gosh, you're doing all this crazy stuff. Well, the fact is, the only people who are seeing that are the people who have already been to your site for some other reason. But it's money well spent. My average pay-per-click on remarketing is like 16 or 17 cents. It's cheap. And I do $50 a day. So right there, that's another $1,500 a month. That's another $18,000 right in remarketing. So between the postcards and the remarketing, I'm already up to $36,000 a year and then the other 14 grand is LinkedIn and Facebook. So there's a lot of stuff you can do, but it works and it generates money, and my business is thriving. So I'm happy to do it.
Yep, love it, man. So, when it comes to the marketing message that you do, right? So, whether you're retargeting or with the new ads that you're hitting them, are you hitting them right away with an offer, or are you doing things where it's more brand, or putting yourself as the authority figure in that space? So then, when they think of bringing a speaker out, they're thinking of you. What does that look like?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, keep in mind the only people I'm targeting are event planners and meeting planners. So those people are hiring speakers. So I don't really have to offer them anything. What I have to do is position myself. I gotta buy the risk out, right? When they're hiring a speaker, like let's say the speaking fee is $10,000 or $15,000, that's a lot of money, right? And so they don't want to screw up. That's the thing. So I need to buy the risk out so they know what to expect. So like right now, I'm talking to you in front of a green screen, and I can show you. I have lighting up in here. It's my studio. This is my office, right? And I do videos all the time, and I put them up on YouTube. I have my own video blog, and my videos are different than yours. I love what you're doing, but it's a different thing. Like I'm wearing a suit and tie and talking business-like, because that's what they hire, right? They have to see what they're going to buy before they buy it. Right. And so for me, I do videos, like I said, on artificial intelligence and machine learning. I'm constantly looking at use cases and case histories, success stories. So when I find them, I accumulate them. And when I have enough for a video, then I make another video, post it up on YouTube. And then inevitably I put that video on my site as well. So if you go to my site, there's like over 200 different videos there. So the people can go to the site. Let's say they found it from a postcard or pay-per-click or remarketing or whatever it is, and they can browse around and see dozens of videos, and they're not going to watch them all, but it gives them confidence, right? They're like, okay, this is what this guy does. It's just like I've watched some of your videos, right? And you got the setup done, you're comfortable, you know what you're doing. Like I wouldn't be afraid to hire you because you've already bought the risk out. Right, and that's so much of marketing is just demonstrating your expertise in the public domain. Right, so content marketing is right. You got to demonstrate that you know what you're talking about. So that's really what I focus on, and it's not really making an offer because they've got a conference once a year, or some of these people do 10 events a year. Some of them do 24 events a year for the bigger companies. But the bottom line is when they're ready to hire someone, they're going to think, yeah, I know that guy. What was his name? I saw his postcard. Yeah, Patrick, that guy. And then they can hire me and they feel comfortable, signing a contract. And it's for, it's a big ticket item, right? If $10,000 or $8,000 or whatever you negotiate down to, it's a lot of money. So, you got to buy the risk out. To me, that's the number one thing.
Yep, I love it. So, and one thing that just, you can tell why you're so successful, right? Because you're a guy that obviously is very intentional with this, and we'll take a space that we both know, which is real estate, right? So you take your realtor, and they're really good at being a realtor. They know the paperwork, they know how to take care of their client needs, but they're not investing the time to study the trends to be relevant, and they're also not studying the time to go out there and learn marketing and do marketing, and that's why you see all these great realtors never make money. So with that, man, you've got a lot going on, because you've got to learn how to be a great speaker and deliver that right. You've got to learn how to go out there and study these new trends to always be relevant ahead of the curve. Plus, you got to learn all this marketing stuff. How do you get started? If somebody's watching this right now and like, holy crap, man, I don't know if I can take all that on, right? Because it can be a lot, right? So how do you get started with that, and what does that look like, for let's say you now typically, and maybe what it would look like when you got started?
This is not going to be the right answer, dude, but it's the one that it's the right answer for me, because it really starts with this. You got to start asking yourself the right questions, right? How can I play a bigger game? How can I play a bigger game? How can I play a bigger game? Every day I ask that, right? Every day is no joke. Sometimes 2-3 times a day I'm at the gym. I just went to the gym a couple hours ago, and I was thinking it there, like, what else can I do? So I actually, about 25% of my business is in the real estate space. So I spoke for the Keller Williams Luxury Homes Division earlier this year in Vegas, and I did a couple of events for Remax, and I just did Windermere up in Portland, and I do lots of real estate events all the time. And like the Windermere one up in Portland, there's maybe 450 people, agents. And see, the luxury homes, the one for Keller Williams was awesome because everyone who was there was 500 people there. Everyone had to qualify with unit sales, and they had to pay $750 to attend. So the audience there were some serious producers in the audience, and that's super fun, and I respect that, right? And so we can talk the same language, but that's not the normal situation. Like what you said, most realtors are struggling, right? You get like 10-20% of the people who are doing really well, but everyone else is struggling and just barely paying their bills. So what I spoke to the folks up in Windermere about was all about this concept of thinking bigger about what you do, right? Redefining what does it mean to be a real estate agent? Are you a real estate agent, or are you a community leader who happens to sell real estate, right? Are you a real estate agent, or are you an expert on economics who happens to sell real estate? Are you a real estate agent, or are you passionate about the neighborhood you live in and you happen to sell real estate? Like I met a woman up there, dynamite woman, and she's doing 3 different types of neighborhood walking tours. And one of them was about the history of the neighborhood. One of them was on like the social infrastructure in the neighborhood, like schools and stuff like that. And the third one, it was about like the institutional, municipal, like hospitals and police station and fire and stuff like that. And she posts them on these websites that are all surrounding a particular neighborhood. And she gets 25 to 30 people. She does each one twice a year, and she does 3 of them, so that's 6 total. So she does it every 2 months, and every time she does it, she gets 25 or 30 people to come with her on these walking tours. This is up in Portland, Oregon. She's showing them around the neighborhood. She's demonstrating that she knows the neighborhood. She knows everything about the neighborhood. And it's all clear because that's what she's doing. She's demonstrating her expertise. And so she gets clients all the time from these walking tours. So again, she's positioning herself as more than just a real estate agent. And I think that's, I know an agent here in Oakland. I live in Walnut Creek in the San Francisco Bay Area, so he's close to me. And he does a pick of the week. Every week he features a different property, and he always picks these super like luxury real estate properties, and they're not even his listings, right? They're someone else's listings, but he's showing them, and he's got an email list. He sends it out to his people because what does it do? It positions him as an expert on luxury real estate. So even if you don't sell luxury real estate, that doesn't mean that you can't feature a piece of premium real estate every week and send it out to an email list, and it's going to position you. People are going to think about you as someone who does luxury real estate. And that doesn't mean that you're saying no to average or, getting started properties, but people have more faith in you if they think that you're also selling premium real estate on top of it. So it's just all about thinking, it's about playing a bigger game. It's about playing a larger role in your community and to the clients that you serve.
Yeah, love it, man. So when you're going out there and identifying these new trends, right? Because you started off speaking about social media, podcasting. Now you're talking about AI and which are all things that I'm really interested in as well. Right? So how do you pick a trend, dude? Like, are you like, hey, I'm gonna become a master in these trends because there's something that I enjoy, have an interest in, or are you studying, the corporate world and seeing like concerns that they have? And then you go study what you know that they want.
Yeah, this is a great question. So they actually, these trends come to me in a way because I do the marketing, and so I get about 20 to 25 inquiries a month. I close maybe 3 or 4 or 5 of them, just to give you an idea. But so what are they asking for? Like they're always saying, we're looking for a speaker to cover this or cover that. So like, for example, big data. Big data came along in like 2012. And all of a sudden, everyone wanted to talk about big data. So, I knew right away, I'm like, okay, obviously this is something that's coming my way, right? And big data led into predictive analytics. And all the 2 of those together went into neural networks and machine learning and AI and all this kind of stuff. So kind of it organically grows. And the thing is that all these trends are overlapping with each other today. like VR is a huge user of AI. Virtual reality is a huge user of artificial intelligence, and it's going to be even more so as time goes on. But here's the thing, and this is the beauty of social media, is that you don't go to the news comes to you, right? So what do you subscribe to, right? Like if I subscribe to you, I see what you do. And you're out there, you're the expert in the field, you're doing what you're doing. So I can just trust that whatever's going to come from Joshua Smith is going to be in line with what I want. Well, I subscribe. That's like the centerpiece of my whole reality, is just trying to keep up with all these damn subscriptions. Like I wake up in the morning. Sometimes I have a dozen videos from channels that I'm subscribed to of stuff I gotta check out to see what's going on, like Singularity University and the Abundance Insider and IBM, and there's an Intel YouTube channel that you can subscribe to. So there's tons of this kind of stuff where you can always find out what's the latest thing, and it doesn't have to be my job to figure out what the latest thing is. Really, what my job is finding case histories and success stories. So right now I'm getting ready for a gig up in Vancouver, Canada, which is actually my hometown. I grew up in Vancouver. Anyway, it's the Association of Corporate Travel Executives. So these are like people who are arranging the travel for big companies like General Electric or whoever, Ford or Cisco. And so I'm right now, just before I did this call, I was on my computer searching for case histories and those are the three phrases, right? Case histories, use cases, success stories. So if I'm doing artificial intelligence, I do artificial intelligence, case histories, artificial intelligence, use cases, artificial intelligence, success stories. And I just dig into this stuff and I try to find the cool stories. And it doesn't take long. I mean, everyone knows the best stories. All I do is put them all in one place. And then in one presentation, like 90% of my keynotes are 60-minute, 1-hour keynotes. So I've only got 60 minutes to work with. And I'll like blast these people with like 20 or 25 case histories, which I'll reference really quickly. Like, hey, this company did that and they got this result. This company tried this over here. And the two of them have this in common, and that's what this third company did as well. So I just try and weave them all together so they see where the overlaps are. It's always the overlaps, right? It's never one story and then another story. It's how do the two overlap with each other? That's where the genius is that you can see, hey, it was the same for both of these. Could you use this? Could you do this in your company, right? In your industry, would it work? And you get people thinking, right? Gosh, can I use this? How does this work? And that's my job. My job is to get people to think more expansively. So it's awesome. I mean, I love what I do because that's, who doesn't like thinking bigger? And it's my job to try and figure out ways to get, like I just did this thing for Schneider Electric, which I don't know if you know them or not. They're huge, 180,000 employees, $33 billion in sales. And they do a ton of those big, like the grid, like the electrical grid, all those huge capacitors, like they produce that stuff. And what they call the industrial IoT, the IoT stands for the Internet of Things. So the industrial Internet of Things. So I did this program for 300 IT engineers, right? They were all like left brain guys, right? There's like 3 women in the whole room. And I just barraged them with all these stories, and they've all heard a couple of them before, but they've never heard them all in 1 hour. And they just get all fired up and excited. And by the end, they're all buzzing, they're all talking to each other, and the event planner's thrilled. Right, and I get to go home with a check in my hand. So it's an awesome deal. It's super fun.
Yeah, I love it. Well, yeah, and like you said, man, success leaves clues, and you find those commonalities. And do you think, because you had some other ventures, doing loans and some of those other spaces before you got into this, what do you feel that it is that you love so much more about this? Is it that you're actually able to go speak to leaders that then can go out there and not just change many more lives, but then it just when you're training the leaders, obviously they impact thousands of lives. Do you feel it has to do with that, a bigger contribution, or do you feel it's something else?
It's probably too. Look, it's validation-seeking behavior, right? This is. I got to admit it, right? It feels good to be on stage talking and having people listen to you. Like, I'm not going to deny that that's a part of it for me. Right. And it's something, look, I wanted to be a speaker when I was like 10 years old. Like I used to I don't practice at all today, but I grew up Catholic, and so with my family, I used to go to church every Sunday, and I used to be jealous of the priests, right? And when they were giving their sermons, I was always like, man, I'd love to do that. So there was a part of me that was going in that direction ever since I was a really, a young kid. But I'll tell you what. So beyond that, right? Validation-seeking behavior, the kind of egocentricity of the whole thing. Like, I acknowledge those things, but what I found was different than what I was expecting to find. I meet the smartest motherfuckers you could ever meet. I mean, it's unreal. Like, everywhere I go, I meet the CEO of the company, or I meet the top salesperson, or I meet the president of the association. Everywhere I go, like, I end up having lunches with, like, the ambassador. I mean, like, I was in Bangkok for an event of financial advisors who all came in from Australia, and the Australian ambassador to Thailand was there, and I had lunch with the guy. I mean, it's so awesome for me. Like, I love people. Well, let me say it slightly differently, and you know this because I've watched enough of your stuff that you sing the same tune. Some people take action in their life. Many people don't really, and they might be afraid, or maybe they got burned before. They don't have the money. Whatever it is, they don't take action. And this is my biggest beef with people, and what I always try to get people to do when I'm doing. When I'm speaking, I'm always encouraging people to try and take action. Like, for example, when I started doing advertising, I didn't start by spending $50,000 a year. Like, I started by spending, I think my first budget was like $20 a day, which is $600 a month. So it's not that much money, but I saw that it had an effect, right? And it actually, at the beginning, it failed, but I was convinced that there was a way to do it. So I tried different things, and eventually I found a combination that did produce some results. So I ratcheted up to 50, then I ratcheted up to 100, then I went up to 150. And so over a period of time, you start to build that kind of stuff. Well, when I travel doing what I do, I'm constantly meeting the action takers. I'm meeting the people who are actually doing stuff. And meanwhile, like, what I'm talking about is helping them and inspiring them to do even more. And it is like 20 times more rewarding than I ever would have imagined. And sometimes people think like that, I think that there's kind of a simplistic view. Sometimes you see anyone in the public domain, or people who are famous, and I'm not famous, okay, but there's people who look at those sorts of people and they think, oh, they're just doing it for the money. And I always think people who think that, it's an incredibly simplistic view. They don't know what it's like, because once you get there, it's fucking awesome. Like, it is awesome. I love it. It gets me fired up. Like, to go, up to Vancouver and do this program, I can't wait to do that program, because I'm going to meet more awesome people, and it's a topic that I'm super passionate about. So this is why I get up in the morning, right? And I spend hours sometimes in front of my computer. Like, sometimes I'll spend like 8 or 9 hours in a row without eating or anything. I don't even realize what's happened, because I'm so fired up about what I'm doing. And yeah, I make a good living. It's good. I'm grateful, but that's not the primary motivator. The primary motivator is just doing something I'm passionate about and helping people who are going to take action on all the different things. It's a super exciting time to be in the world today. And I love people who are taking advantage of that.
Yeah, it's one of these things with the average person in society that hasn't found out how to go out there and make a living at their passion, and they just can't fathom it. They can't get it. Like, if you're working 80 hours a week, oh, you must be greedy, right? When they don't really get it, but no, man, I do this. Even if I won the lottery, I'd still be doing this, right? Because I love it so much, and I think, people understand if you're like a professional athlete. They're like, oh, they're chasing their dreams. Nobody criticizes them for working 80 or 100 hours a week. But you get guys like entrepreneurs like you and I that feel like a professional athlete probably feels, right? We get criticized heavily for it,
I mean, look, I'm an ambitious guy, right? I want, love, respect, and choices. That's what I've always wanted in my life. Love, respect, and choices. And money equals choices, right? I want to have choices in my life. I want to be able to do the things that I want to do. But it's, there is a real kind of, core motivation that comes out of you when you start to hit your stride. And it took me years. Oh my gosh, I struggled like crazy. I racked up credit card debt. I've got a whole video on that I did where I show my monthly credit card balances. It was a disaster. And at its peak, when my credit card balances were over $40,000, like I straight up had panic attacks and anxiety, and like I was social isolation. I mean, it was brutal. It was, I had 5 years where I really made almost no money at all. And it screws with your head. It messes with your head when you go through it. Because, of course, you always think you're just about to turn the corner. You're like, oh, I'm like, in a few months it's going to be fine. And then you just keep going day after day, week after week, month after month. And 5 years later, you're still struggling. It screws with your head. But when, it's funny, like I had all this anxiety and stuff, which in a way I'm kind of embarrassed to admit it, but it's true. It was unexpected. I'd never had it before my whole life, and all of a sudden I had this anxiety. But I thought the stress would come from the failure, and it's not true. The stress comes when you start to succeed. Right? At least that's what happened for me. Like all of a sudden I'm starting to go to Moscow and deliver a program. Like people are paying me a bunch of money. Like there's high expectations. You got to deliver. And I got 1 hour that I have to get up there and do a good job. And it was the success that stressed me out more, but at the same time, it was the success that gave me this whole new motivation that I never even knew. Before that, all I was trying to do was get some money and some stability in my life. But once I hit my stride, I realized there's all this other stuff that is so much more rewarding when you don't have to worry about money all the time. And it's not to say that, again, I'm not a millionaire. I'm not pretending to be, but I've got enough income coming in where I don't have to worry about the bills. Like I can just kind of let that take care of itself and focus on what I love to do. And that's when you start, in my opinion, that's when things really start getting a lot of fun.
Yep, love it. So when you did your first speech, man, because I know as a kid you had this vision of wanting to be a speaker, but public speaking is a freaky thing, right? So it's like the number one fear on earth before even death for most people is public speaking. So did you have any of those nerves and any of those fears in the beginning that you had to overcome, even though that you want to do it? And if so, how did you overcome those?
That's another good one. First off, I get nervous every time I speak. Like every time I speak, when I get on stage, I'm nervous. But it's a feeling you get used to the feeling. It's just like, if you ever played sports in front of an audience, right? Like you're playing football or basketball and people are watching. Right? The first couple times you do that, like it's kind of freaky. You're like, people are watching. But after a while, like you get used to that feeling, and the fact that they're watching makes you sharper. It keeps you sharper. And so that's kind of where it's come now, is that, sometimes when I'm up there, like in my brain, I can think about a sentence like 3 sentences ahead of where I'm at and how I'm going to word that sentence 3 sentences ahead of where I am at that moment. Like would never do that in regular life. So it's a level of clarity that you get partially because you're nervous, right? But I'll tell you what, I remember 2012 was the first time that I went to Dubai to speak at the e-government conference, which is like the governments of the GCC region, the Gulf, Persian Gulf area. All these governments trying to do more services over the internet and do things electronically. And they brought me in to speak, and it was all like, 350. They were all Arabs because it's public sector, so they're all wearing their white, their robes and stuff. And this was at the Ritz-Carlton in Dubai. I'll never forget. And I had to walk up on that stage, and I was scared to death. And I was like, this is insane. And meanwhile, like my dad had passed away 3 years before that. And I remember thinking, like, there's like 5 steps that go up to the stage, and I was just being introduced. And I thought about my dad, and I was like, dude, like, this is it, brother. Like, I have got to do this. Like, I have to be willing to do this. And I say this to myself a lot, and I think this applies to real estate. It applies to anything. Like, it could be as simple as doing cold calls, or it really doesn't matter what it is. Like, you have to be willing to do this. You have to be willing to do what's necessary to achieve the vision, the success that you're after. And if you're not, then you got to reevaluate what that vision is. Because if you have a disconnect between the vision and what you're willing to do, you're going to live a whole life of disappointment. Right? You have to have a bridge. How do you get a bridge from your vision of what you want to actually to doing what's necessary to get it? If you have that bridge, then you can have a cycle of it works, right? You do something, you get results, you get improvement, and it's a positive feedback loop, right? But if you don't have that positive feedback loop, you're just going to live your life depressed and frustrated. And I lived that for 5 years. It was horrible. So I really think it's important to be like, number one, figure out what you have to do, and number two, like really embrace the fact that you have to be willing to do this. Like I had to be willing to stand on that stage and potentially make a fool of myself, which I kind of did, by the way. Not in that first session, but later on, they brought a few speakers back on the stage to like answer some last minute questions. I answered some of them badly. One of them I answered really badly, but whatever. But the bottom line is like, and I've felt that way a million times where I get up on a stage and I'm like, you've got to swallow this pill. Like this is something you have to do. And when you take that approach to it, like it's like, bungee jumping. Like once you're off the platform, there's nothing you can do, right? You're just falling at that point, so you got to deal with it one way or another. It's the same thing. Like once you take that step, right, jump off the diving board, now you're on your own, and that's when the fun starts.
Yep, love it, man. So and this really applies to everybody in life, not just speakers, but there's a big difference between those that are committed and those that are interested, right? And committed is you show up no matter what, your emotional state, whatever. Like I don't speak like you do, but I speak a little bit. I don't get paid big money to do it though, not yet anyway, I guess. But anyway, I was speaking in Houston. This was last month. And 500 real estate agents there, people driving in from all over. So I obviously had to show up. I got really sick the day, 2 days before. I had to get on stage with a 102-degree temperature and speak for 4 hours. And you got to still get up there and deliver, right? So like when you're going to Dubai, this big company's hired you, paid you all this money, but man, maybe you're not feeling good or you're not in that. I mean, do you have what do you do in those moments? Do you have a routine that you follow to put yourself in the right state, or like how do you show up when you're not feeling like you want to show up?
Yeah, dude, like there's a right answer and a wrong answer, right? I mean, like I will take meds, dude. Like I will not screw around. Like simple stuff. I mean, yeah. So there is two sides to this. Like I did this thing in Miami for National Business Review. It's the NPR. It's the finance. They do these interviews, and so they did an interview, and I had a brutal sore throat. Like it felt like there was a knife going through my throat. So I took like 6 Advils, right? It was 200 milligrams each. So I'm at 1,200 milligrams of Advil going through my system. Like you do what you got to do. But a lot of this, and I've done other stuff. Like I'm not going to deny. I mean, I do what I need to do to get up there. But the nice thing about me, and by the way, like what you do, dude, I've watched some of your stuff, like, and doing the 4-hour stuff. I mean, I don't think I could do that. I mean, because it's a different energy. It's a different dynamic. It's a different energy level. Like for me, I've got an hour. Sometimes it's 45 minutes. The thing I did for Schneider Electric was 45 minutes that I did for them. So it's not that long. So it's a mental game more than anything. Like if you're not feeling well, like, you just got to suck it up. I mean, I don't have a better answer than that. You just got to go up there and be willing to do it. I mean, I've had times. I've had times where I got super, like I was not feeling well, and at the same time I get nervous, and then you become aware of the fact that you're nervous, which makes you even more nervous, and so then you start sweating like crazy in your armpits, and the whole thing just escalates. And I wasn't wearing a jacket. It's simple things like I always wear a jacket now, because if I start sweating because I'm nervous, you can't see it because I'm wearing a jacket. Like I got a buddy of mine that he goes on stage to speak. And he literally has ice packs that he attaches to this vest that he wears, and he can go up on stage because otherwise he gets overheated because he's so nervous and he starts sweating like crazy. So he literally has ice packs so you do what you got to do. I mean, it's, but those end up becoming the war stories, just like I'm telling them to you and he tells them to me. Like it becomes part of the journey. It's like, yeah, I had to do this, I had to do that. Like, it's shitty at the moment, but it's fun afterwards, and recounting the whole thing.
Yeah, man, and it is entrepreneurs, man. I mean, we don't really grow through successes. You grow through those failures, and you learn, and then, like you said, I mean, dude, if everything always went smooth, man, it wouldn't be near as exciting, right? So you talked about, you ask yourself this question all the time of how can I play a bigger game, right? So is there more to that than just asking yourself the question? Do you have a process, like a reflection process, where you break this down? If you feel like you've been stagnant, or do you find if you just ask yourself that question enough, just the answers eventually come?
Well, I mean, you don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? I mean, just like, I'm inspired by people I follow, right? And you, I'm sure you are too, all the people. I think the best thing about what you're doing is you're meeting so many incredible people doing all these interviews. It's really cool. So, when I think about how do I play a bigger game, like I just think, okay, who is in this space? Who's the leader in this space? Like, and what is the leader? Here's something that's followed me for like the last 20 years. And the simplicity of this is deceptive. But the road to being is through doing. The road to being is through doing. If you want to be happy, you need to do happy. Right? If you want to be healthy, you need to do healthy. And if you want to be successful, you need to do successful. You need to find people who are successful in your field and do whatever they're doing. In other words, the doing comes first, right? In real estate, if you want to be a $100,000 producer, you got to do what a $100,000 commission person does before you get the money. Like, the money hasn't arrived yet, but you got to do those actions first, because the road to being is through doing. If you want to be $1 million producer, you have to do the things that $1 million producers are doing before you get the money, right? And it takes a certain mindset. It is the same thing we talked about earlier about coming down onto your goals from above. Like, you got to pretend it's like the fake it till you make it thing, right? I mean, there's truth to that, and it's not bad. That's the story of life. That's the secret of life, is that you always have to be ahead of your current reality. So if you're making whatever, I mean, it doesn't matter what the numbers are, but let's say you're making 50 grand, you want to make 100 grand. Like, you got to do what a 100 grand person does first. You got to start doing that stuff. And if you want to up it up to the point where you're making $1 million a year, you got to start doing those things. So for me, like, who are the leading keynote speakers, that I model these guys, right? And these Mike Walsh and Jeremy Gucci and Ryan Estes, and these are people you probably wouldn't know, because they're not celebrities. They're not like Tony Robbins. Like, those are platform speakers, and obviously I'm not Bill Clinton, so I'm not going to make those kind of dollars. But who are the career keynote speakers? Like, my kind of stock rates are like 10,000 for domestic events, 15 for international. That's my shelf rate. Like, I negotiate down from that. But there's other guys that are doing like 25 grand for domestic events and 35,000 for international. Like Mike Walsh, I think, is in that range, even though I don't really know for sure. But he's an awesome guy. He's based in Singapore. I follow that guy. And what is he doing? What does his website look like? Look at it. I look at his photos, right? Having good photos, that's one of the biggest things I tell real estate agents, is go spend $300 and get some great photos taken where you look like a celebrity. Because that visual image of who you are, like, you have that standard photo that every real estate agent has in front of that stupid background that's like half gray and half blue and half red or whatever. It looks ridiculous. You look like you're in high school. Like, spend $200 or $300, post it on Craigslist. You can find someone for cheap to take some awesome pictures of you so that you look badass, and so you look like you're already there. And then it's all those things feed into it. It's the same thing with doing videos. Like, doing videos. In fact, I spent $4,000 earlier this year for a new highlight reel. And I hired a guy who's like a filmmaker. I mean, and he gave me a screaming deal, because I think he would usually charge, well, I know he would charge more, but I don't know how much more. But anyway, he gave me a good deal. And anyone can see it. You can go to my website, and it's only 2 minutes long. But the point is that by hiring someone to create a video that makes you look like a rock star, people start thinking you're a rock star. Like, it's like, I fought like crazy to get that gig in Dubai in 2012, and as soon as I got home, I became the guy who spoke in Dubai. right? Like it's when you do something, you become the person who did it. The two things happen at the same time. Every time you do anything, you become the person who did it. And so if you go out there and do, like, you're looking at the other agents in your office, and some of them are doing 5 things to build their business every month, and someone else is doing 100 things every month to build their business. Well, the person who does 100 things became the person who did 100 things. Like, the road to being is through doing. That becomes, it's like building a wall, like, or a building out of brick, right? At the beginning, 3 bricks on the side of the road, it's garbage. It doesn't mean anything. But when you keep stacking them, right? Every brick on its own doesn't mean much. It might be something small, like a photograph or a video. Who cares? But you keep stacking them. And after a while, you got a whole wall, and the whole thing starts to take shape. Like, everyone's always looking for these home run strategies. I don't think I've ever hit a home run in my whole life, but I've hit a lot of base hits, right? A lot of little base hits, little things, incremental, right? I have this saying that I say to myself all the time, which is to add permanence to everything you do. So anything you do, have something that's left behind that's permanent, whether it's a logo on your website or a photograph or a video or a blog post or anything, a podcast, right? Anything that you do, have something that's left behind that's permanent. Because when you accumulate those, after a while, like, people go to my website, and again, it's not the best website. In fact, there's a lot of things I want to improve on it, but there's a lot of stuff on there. And so people are like, wow, you've done a lot of stuff. What does that do? That buys the risk out, right? That compresses my conversion funnel. So that, out of every 100 people who go to my website, maybe 3 of them hire me instead of 1. I mean, that sounds like a small difference, but it triples your business, right? So these little things make a big impact over time.
Yeah, so when you first started with this, though, speaking of that, like becoming that guy that spoke in Dubai, or, because everybody, when they start out, they're like, well, I just want to get paid first, right? Did you have a series of time where you had to go out there and maybe speak for free just to get some of that credibility and be that guy to build that up to eliminate, like you said, the risk out?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, there's in my business, there's basically there's the free circuit, the cheap circuit, the pro circuit, and the celebrity circuit. So, and the funny thing is, they are parallel universes. So, like, if you get a referral from the free circuit, it will also be in the free circuit, most likely. In other words, you can't really get referrals up the ladder. Like, it's a different marketing, it's a different positioning. But when I got started, I spoke for free at like 1 million Rotary clubs and chambers of commerce and meetups and all kinds of stuff, and even local real estate offices, by the way, years ago. But like I said, it didn't. I mean, what it did is it gave me stage time. It gave me, like, I was more comfortable doing what I was doing. But it didn't. Like, I had to do new marketing to get the better business, and that was a big realization. Like, I thought that the more I spoke for free, I would get referrals to get paid, but it just never happened. And maybe it happens for some people. It didn't happen for me. So, I got to a point where I started to actively, and by the way, like, it wasn't all paid. Like, I do a lot of SEO work, search engine optimization. So my site ranks, for very specific phrases that, keynote speaker on a particular topic, like that sort of thing. It's easier to rank for those longer phrases. Like, if someone, for example, this is a great example. There's a book out there called Mindset, and by the author's name is Carol Dweck. It's a great book, one of the most successful nonfiction books of the last decade. It was released in 2007. Anyway, in that book, she makes the distinction between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. And you can kind of, I'm sure it's obvious. The growth mindset is believing you can do something, believing you can grow. And so as a result of that, those people are generally more successful. So I did a video on the growth mindset. I put it on my website, and I called that page, I didn't call it growth mindset, I called it keynote speaker on growth mindset. So now, like, I've done 6 or 7 programs over the last 2 years on the growth mindset, because when you search for a keynote speaker on growth mindset, I rank higher than Carol Dweck, and she's the one who wrote the book. So, like, because she doesn't, she probably doesn't care about doing the SEO, but for me, like, I care about all that stuff. So I build that content. So there's a lot of things that I do, to get the name out there. But even there, like I learned a long time ago that people who are searching on Google for a keynote speaker generally have lower budgets than corporate event planners because they don't search on Google. Like they've got their own resources. They call their contacts at a bureau or whatever. So if you want to make like, 5,000, 10,000, 15,000, whatever, some higher fee, you're probably not going to get that through SEO. You'll get it through paid advertising. But so that's what I mean. Like there's different strata. So I did speak a lot for free early on, 2008, 2009. I spoke everywhere for free. But in 2010 and 2011, I started to really get more focused in doing the marketing I needed to do to get in front of the right eyeballs.
Yeah, love it, man. So, you did the podcast, and the podcast led to a demand for speaking. Now you're doing the speaking, and obviously you're very successful at it, and people probably see that. Do you, maybe you already are doing this, or if not, do you see yourself ever going, because I'm sure the demand's there, of almost having a coaching platform where you teach other people to go out there and be great keynote speakers?
Yeah, dude, I struggle with this. I get asked about this all the time. And actually, twice this week already. I've had conversations from people who want to become speakers, and I've got a program I put together. I've never really marketed it. I've got a book on my speaking career called Keynote Mastery, which sells. It doesn't sell tons. It sells a few copies every a few dozen copies every month. But I'm not good at coaching. I'm just not good at it. I don't feel that comfortable doing it. I don't like taking, let me say it. I'll be kind of a little more honest. I don't like selling things to individuals. I like selling stuff to companies. And I'll tell you the reason why, because I have this meetup group that I started way back in 2006 or something. And it's an entrepreneur meetup. It's got like 3,000 members. It was a big group, and we used to hold events all the time. And everyone always wanted to come to the event and try and sell their stuff to my audience. And I just found, number one, I really don't like that. It just doesn't feel congruent for me to do it. And like I said before, there's people who make a fortune doing that, and I respect it. I have no problem if they can do it and they're comfortable doing it. I'm just not that comfortable doing it. But the thing I did notice is that the people quite often who can least afford to buy it are the first ones to buy it. And sometimes the people who are maybe least capable of achieving what the program strives to teach are the first ones to buy it. And there was one example in particular. There's a woman, and she's a super nice woman. I knew her for like a year before I saw this. But she was kind of a little bit more shy and timid. Great, like I said, she's a great woman, but she wasn't like an extrovert. She was more of an introvert. And she was an accountant, but she'd been laid off. And so now she was trying to be self-employed, doing accounting-related consulting type work. And she wanted to go to this industry rock star 3-day weekend where she was going to learn how to just do all this, rock star stuff. And I just thought, there's no way she's going to be what the promise is of this program. And meanwhile, she liquidated her IRA to pay for it. And I know this is not, there's a lot of people that do not fall into this category. And again, I'm in a way I feel bad, like even talking like this, because I know I'm looking at just one tiny part of the market. But I just saw it firsthand, and I thought, this is crazy. I couldn't sleep at night. It's someone like that. And I actually, once upon a time, I did sell a program, and I was actually really, really disciplined in saying, I will not accept you in this program unless you have these, a few things in place. Because it wasn't for their benefit, it was for mine, because I just didn't feel comfortable taking their money. But if they had some money, if they had some stability in their life, and if they had a real chance of achieving, of becoming a keynote speaker, which is what they wanted, then yeah, I am happy to help. But today I don't really do it at all.
Yep, love it, man. So, all right, so you're out there, constantly studying all these trends, and one thing that you talked about is AI. When you're forced to study this stuff, man, is anything like, I don't know, the last couple of years have really opened your eyes and switched your mindset with just business and the economy and the future, studying some of these crazy fields that you're speaking on, right?
Yeah, well, boy, if you open up this Pandora's box, we can be on this call for 2 hours here. I mean, let me tell you the short version. There's the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? So there's the big thing is technology is evolving along an exponential curve, and that we are, as human beings, we are hardwired to think in linear terms. So to think exponentially, you have to train yourself to do that. You have to work on you constantly remind yourself to think in exponential terms. So there's this very common little quip that you hear all the time. So if you had a pond and lilies start growing on the pond, and every day the number of lily pads on the pond doubles, and on the 30th day the entire pond is covered in lily pads, on what day is it only 50% covered? And of course the answer is the day before. Right? The 29th day it's half covered, it doubled, and now is covered. The whole thing was covered the very next day. And people don't think that way. Right? Their instinct is, I don't know, 18th day, 23rd day. No, it's the day before. And things accelerate. So, and this happened with the Human Genome Project. So it was started in 1990, and in 1997 they had completed 1% of the human genome. And all these scientists were like, "Oh my gosh, we've only done 1% in 7 years. It's going to take us 700 more years to finish this." But there was a few people, including this guy Ray Kurzweil, who you probably know that name, and he was like, "No, if we're at 1%, we're almost done. Because if it's doubling, it only takes 7 years. Like if you're doubling 1 to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 8, 8 to 16, 16 to 32, 32 to 64, 64 to 128, you're past 100. So if you're doubling in size every year, 1% to 100% is only 6.5 years. So, and it's a weird thing to think about. So this stuff is coming fast. Like, autonomous vehicles, they are going to be on the roads within 3 to 4 years. And within 10 years, it's going to be completely commonplace, and very few people will even be buying cars because you'll buy a subscription where you have 1,000 miles a month. And you just call it on your mobile phone, it comes, picks you up, drops you off wherever, and then it goes and picks someone else up and just drives around all day. And because right now, you have a car, where's your car? It's parked somewhere. I have a car, it's parked right outside my place. Right, so everyone's got a car. Most of them are just sitting there parked. But once this whole transition happens, and it's going to happen fast, why would anyone buy a car unless you're just a hobbyist or an enthusiast and you want to drive it on a track or something? But just to get around during the day or go to work on Monday to Friday, people are going to buy these subscriptions. So that's another kind of part of this, right? So they say that robotics and automation and algorithms are going to displace anywhere between 50 and 70% of the jobs in our economy over the next 30 years. Think about that. I mean, seriously, like 50%. Is that possible? It's possible, right? This stuff is possible. And what's going to happen when the unemployment rate, like at that level, but at the same time, the costs of doing things are actually coming down. Like there's this democratization of technology where now you've got a smartphone in your pocket that's really the amalgamation of like 100 different devices 30 years earlier, and you can get the whole thing for next to nothing. And there's other things that are becoming cheaper. So, like, what's the economy going to look like in 20 years? I think there's going to be a lot of people who make just little bits of money here and there, just enough to get by, but getting a good regular job is not going to be easy to do because so much of it is going to be done by automation and algorithms. So is that good or bad? I mean, it's good in the sense that, we're going to have an unbelievably nice lifestyle where things are basically done for us, but there's going to be a lot of unemployed people and people who are financially frustrated. So, it's a crazy time. The real thing is that technology is a huge trend, and some people are exploiting that trend and making a fortune. It's a form of leverage. Technology is a form of leverage. So if you which side of the leverage equation are you on? Are you on the right side of the leverage equation where you're exploiting the trend and making a fortune, which you're doing right now by doing these podcasts, right? You're aligning yourself with the technology. So am I, by the way, or at least I'm trying to. Or are you being leveraged by the technology, which means it's going to be harder and harder for you to eke out a living and do well for yourself if you're on that side of the leverage equation. And it's a simple question to ask yourself. Is what you do for a living a routine, somewhat mundane task which a computer could learn to do? If it is, you got to position yourself in front of something different that sets you apart, where you're learning new things. You're doing something that a computer can't easily do. And I'm very lucky, I think you are too, because my whole job is to try and educate people on this trend. So I think I can stay in front of it long enough, to retire one day.
Yeah, well, and to your point, it's what are the necessary skill sets that I can add to myself that don't skate to where the puck is, skate to where it's going. Wayne Gretzky's quote of, well, maybe I should learn how to if I'm going to be replaced by a computer, let me learn how to code right so I can create the damn computer or create the program. Or, but I'm a huge Ray Kurzweil fan, and I get really intrigued by this stuff. I mean, if you really think about it, 100 years ago, our main form of transportation was horses. We were shoveling shit off the sidewalk, and now Elon Musk is figuring out how to get us to Mars. So people that don't wake up to it, I'm just like, man, it can't have resistance to this stuff. It's all coming. There's predictions.
There's a lot of unemployed horses.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So there's predictions out there, like for example, that Walmart might be out of business within 15 years because of all the bricks and mortar, and they haven't been able to keep up with companies like Amazon that in Seattle are like to your doorstep in 2 hours with drones, and that's where they're trying to take this. So with all these trends that you see and you're speaking to all these companies, what are some adaptations and shifts as far as a company or any entrepreneur they feel like they really need to start making, otherwise they're going to become extinct?
Yeah, so I mean that's another good one. So you're good at this, dude. The innovation always comes from the edges, right? I mean, like remember before we said the overlap. So you have like one reality over here, you have another reality over here. Well, what's the overlap in between the two? And that overlap is the edge for each one individually, right? So it's always innovation always comes from the edges. So you can ask yourself, like, let's just take this from a business perspective, like, what's the biggest threat to your industry, right? Who's your worst supplier? Could you do that in-house? That's looking up the supply chain, right? Or what about down the supply chain, right? What else do your customers want? What's the completely unrealistic thing that your customers are asking for? One day, someone's going to give it to them, right? Can you be that person? Like, or another one is, which is a great one, is how can your assets be used differently? So, like as human beings, like our assets are, the way we look, the way we dress, the way we communicate, the way we think. Like those are our assets, and even we have physical assets as well, of course. But there's a lot of value in just always thinking, like, what else can I do with this skill set? What is leadership, right? I mean, who do you find, if you think about like, who represents leadership in our world? Like, is it Bill Gates or Elon Musk or Donald Trump? Or, I mean, it doesn't really matter, right? Whatever your conception of a leader is, think about that. Who are those people? Because at the end of the day, like talking about, playing a bigger game, doing what the leaders in your industry are doing, right? At the extreme of that is, who do you consider to be a leader in your experience on this planet? How can you do what they're doing? Like, how can you do what like Elon Musk is doing? I mean, that guy, he's like a personal hero of mine. It's unbelievable the stuff he's doing. So it's not that you can do it or I can do it, but the more we think that way in exponential terms, the more we can start to kind of plan for that and think, okay, I've got, like for me, I've got, I communicate a certain way, and again, I'm not the best communicator in the world, but I'm not bad at it, and I've worked at it, and I'm passionate about it. So where else can I use that? Well, I mean, being a speaker, I'm doing that. I love it. I mean, politics is another one. I wouldn't want to go into politics, but it's something I could do. Sales is something, and I've thought about going into real estate a million times, but I don't like working in the evenings and weekends, which I think is super common in that industry. There's little things, right? But I always think, okay, I've got a skill set. How else can I use it? And who else out there in the world has a similar skill set to me and is right at the top of their game. And how can I emulate what he or she is doing? I mean, I know it's ethereal, is kind of theoretical, but it's a mind game, right? You train your brain. There's a guy, James Altucher. I read books by the dozen, and this guy James Altucher wrote a book. I forget the title of it, but he says, write down 10 business ideas every day, and it doesn't matter if they're good ideas or not. Like, he has these little cards. I actually bought them to take his advice, like these little note cards, these 5x7 cards. And he says, just have it in your back pocket. And as you're going through your day, if you have a business idea, write it down. Who cares if you do anything with it? Who cares if it's a good idea or a bad idea? What you're doing is you're building a muscle. And the muscle is, after a while, you're going to be an idea person, right? You're going to have ideas coming out of your ass. And everyone's going to be like, man, he's always got good ideas, or just ideas, whether they're good or bad. Like, it's a muscle. We can learn to do these things. And when you ask yourself these questions, or think in bigger terms, or ask yourself, how can I play a bigger game? Inevitably what you're doing is you're training your brain to think more expansively than most of your peers. And that's where it all starts.
Yep. Yeah, I love that, man. I talked to a gentleman one time that, worth hundreds of millions, may even be $1 billion at this point, but he said something very similar, right? Like, you just come up with your ideas. You can get it wrong every single day for your whole entire life. It just takes one idea of getting right one time to become a billionaire, right? And that's all it takes, man. So I love it. So, Patrick, what's the best way for people to reach out to you, to learn more about you? If somebody's, we got a lot of broker owners that are listening to this, a lot of industry leaders that maybe they want to come out and have you speak and keynote speak at their company. What's the best way to get a hold of you, reach out to you, and learn more about you?
Yeah, it's very cool. So my last name is a disaster. So, my URL, my website is patrickschwerdtfeger.com. But if I just left it at that, I would never get any traffic. So the easiest way to find me is go to bookpatrick.com. Book is in like to hire somebody. Bookpatrick.com, and that'll forward to my website. And yeah, for sure. I know you've got a big audience. So if there's people listening that you see a place for my approach and my kind of my mentality, this is what I do. I love what I do. So let me know. And like I said, Josh, I appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with you. I've been following you for a while too, so it's pretty cool to put it together, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, love it, man. Absolutely. So, those of you watching, listen, we're going to have a link right below to make it easy on you to click on, go check out Patrick's site, and make it easy on you there as well. So, just, I know we're getting long on time, so just a couple quick last questions for you. If something happened today, knowing what you know now, like you've retained all this information that you learned over all these years of being an entrepreneur, if something happened today and you got financially wiped out and you had to restart over from scratch, knowing what you know now today, what are the first couple things you'd immediately go out there and do to go out there and rebuild?
Start a video blog. No question. That's an easy one, actually, because just green screen, and I like I said, I can show you, I got these lights that I bought. I bought on Amazon for $85. I got a little tripod right here. The camera's downstairs, and then I got this fabric on the wall. It's so easy. I set the whole thing up for like less than $400, and adding a camera. And meanwhile, when I started my video blog, it doubled my business. It was almost immediate. And it's not that there were more people who found me, although that started to happen later. But it was that the people who were finding me already were seeing all this video on my site that it bought the risk out. It demonstrated my expertise in the public domain so they could watch it, 2 o'clock in the morning if that's when they saw it, without calling me. There's a study that they do every year which looks at what percentage of the purchase decision is made before they contact the supplier. It's very relevant in real estate. Because today, and this percentage just gets higher and higher every year, but right now it's 57%. So 57% of the purchase decision, more than half the purchase decision, is made before they contact the supplier. That is critical, and every year it's getting higher. So you have to have stuff online that shows what you do and what you know and who you are, so that they can go through the process and build some trust with you before they pick up the phone or send you an email.
Yep. Love it, man. Powerful stuff, dude. So, I started this podcast Probably very similar reason that you started yours, right? To go out there and because there's a lot of smoke and mirrors that exist out there, and it's hard to sort through what's the actual good information compared to the crap that exists, and with all these quote unquote gurus. So I started this space where I'm like, I'm just going to interview the doers, guys like yourself that are out there doing massive things, that are building businesses, that are in the trenches, that have overcome adversity, and deliver that content out there. And our listeners are here listening because, of course, they want to go out there and create an epic, amazing life for themselves. And with that being said, do you have any last words of advice or inspiration that you'd like to leave them with so they can go out there and create that life they know they want and deserve?
Yeah, think big, act small, right? Think the biggest goals you can possibly think, and just take the tiniest step. Like, people get hung up; they think they have to take a huge step. Like, don't try to do a home run. Don't ever try to do a home run. I've never. Well, that's not true. I have tried many times, and I've never actually gotten one, so it didn't matter. But just do small stuff. Do little things, and add permanence to everything you do, because it builds up. Like, over a period of time, you do this for a few years. Even a few months, you can build up enough stuff where people are like, wow, you've done a lot of stuff. So think big, act small.
Yep. Powerful words, man. So to our listeners, I know I never podcast with this, you guys, but information without implementation truly is just the start of delusion. Information is not power. It's taking action on that information that creates power inside your world. So Patrick shared so many amazing pieces of information with you guys today. Apply something that you learned. Don't wait on this. Take action right now. Go out there so you can create that life you know you want and deserve. Like I said, there's going to be a link below to Patrick's website. Go out there, check it out right away. He's got a ton of great content on there. His YouTube channel is amazing. So check that out as well and watch his videos. And Patrick, man, this has been a massive honor, brother. Really appreciate you taking time out of a busy day to be here.
Dude, I love it. I appreciate the time, and we'll do it again sometime. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, 100%. All right, you guys, we will see you next time.